Hi all, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Thursday, November 3rd, 2022, and you're watching WGAN-TV live at 5. We have a super awesome geeky show today for Matterport service providers, Matterport MatterPak and E57 file, a comparison of the Matterport Pro3 camera versus the Matterport Pro2 camera versus the Leica BLK360 camera. And here to talk to us about this topic is Robotic Imaging co-founder and CEO, Mike Chawaga. Hey, Mike, good to see
Dan.
you. Thanks for being on the show again.
Thanks. Excited to be back.
Thank you. I know we have absolutely the right subject matter expert for today's show. Mike, before we even jump in, how about telling us about robotic imaging?
Yeah, so robotic imaging, we started as like a virtual tour drone provider for real estate, quickly transitioned to commercial real estate, and people started needing accurate dimensions. And so we've messed with the sensors and upper accuracy, starting with virtual tour information. We've begun to stack other digital twin information with LiDAR systems. And so we were really excited when the Pro3 got into that LiDAR data that we could, start to use and combine and give our clients a better remote picture of the site without them being there.
Give me a kind of an overview of the kinds of gear that you're using to do your scanning.
So when we approach the building industry, which is composed of the architects, engineers, construction, owners, and developers, we'll always give them visual information, which will be in the form of Matterport, and then aerial drone, and then we'll use Leica Geosystems to go and get that millimeter or a quarter-inch drawing accuracy across the entire site. So we'll use the RTC 360s, BLK 360s, the P series, P40, P50s, and then we'll always deliver that visual information as a separate data set, so they can get a good picture of the existing conditions.
So for our Matterport service providers who are familiar with the Matterport Pro2 camera and now the Matterport Pro3 camera, some of those Leica scanners that you were talking about are really $20,000 to $60,000 scanners?
Yeah, so the BLK is the entry LiDAR sensor, or it was really the entry LiDAR sensor to just really understand that data, the least accurate of the laser scanners that we have and the market really has. So that's about 20,000 is the BLK 360. RTC 360 is about 80 new, and then we got the P series. You can get those for around 100 to 140 now, and then P50 is around like 150,000. So yeah, so it's a variety of scanners, and it's all about getting them on site and using them to be able to pay for those. So
yes, awesome. And you mentioned that you're working with architects, engineers, the construction professionals. Are there other categories of clients that you're working with?
We've seen some. So it's really been that real estate development, and that's like the core five for us, which I'll name them again: it's architects, engineers, construction firms, owners, and developers. And so we've seen some movement in the video game space, so the Matterport Panospheres and that color data that produces now, you can treat that as an OBJ file into Unity and Unreal Engine. So we've seen some video game creators that would be really interested in speeding up their design process, but it's the same thing as architectural designers as it would be like a video game designer. We give them the background, existing conditions for them to speed up their production.
Awesome. And since the time that you got started 5 years ago with a Matterport camera, how many team members have you grown to in terms of employees?
Yeah, so we have about 10 employees now, and then a variety of 1099s across the nation that help us capture and collect the data that in our standard formats. So about 10 W-2s and independent contractors that work with us, and we're always looking to expand the team. And if someone's good at photogrammetry or drone stitching or any of those things, like we're looking to add partners.
So that's awesome. So if someone was interested in a scan anywhere in the United States or around the globe, they could get in touch with Robotic Imaging, and you'll take care of one order, multiple markets.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're in anywhere in the US, we'd love to add you to our directory to know that you can capture that information, in those certain regions, and then what cameras you have. So it's all about identifying, what sensors are where, and if that person's qualified to handle the data capture and data standards.
All right, cool. So those interested, whether it's to order a scan or to be a potential service provider for robotic imaging, go to www.roboticimaging.com.
Yep. Thanks, Dan.
Yes, awesome. So, and again, before we even jump into this super geeky topic of E57 files, MatterPaks, tell us about your experience, your first impressions with the Matterport Pro3 camera.
Yeah, so we love it. We're used to being on site, twice as long, maybe 3 times as long in some of the industrial commercial environments that we try to get the Matterport Pro2 to pick up on. And so we like the speed of capture of it. Another big thing when we're doing commercial and industrial properties is when you get to the end of a building and you go up and down the stairwells, it's usually way off on the Pro2. And so this, it just helps you align. You're going to still see some discrepancy in the data, just as you would with the Pro2, it just be less of it, less scan misalignments. And then the exterior is also a big plus that we've just been doing the 360 slideshow data with the exterior drone photos. And so having that all in one, saves us time on the post process again too, to not have to set up all those 360s and align them. So it really, from the commercial real estate realm, we've seen that being a big plus, if not a whole new product that we're giving them with that exterior data.
So is there a way to kind of tick off what the highlights are of the things you love about it?
Yeah, so again, speed of capture, scan alignment, it's pretty much automatic. And then the exterior, those 3 are big for us. And we're definitely looking to buy more of them. And we're looking to hold the Pro2s, especially with the classic plan. And so, we still see that beneficial, and, they might just need some maintenance here and there, getting the sensors adjusted.
Okay, so just for our community that may not be familiar with Matterport Classic pricing, that would have been the pricing as of 2019 and previous, and there are a number of Matterport service providers that have that plan. Worth pointing out that Matterport Classic plan does not work with the Matterport Pro3 camera, so that meant that you had to add a Matterport cloud account with current pricing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, it's worth it. Clients will pay for it. And, you're hosting a website, so it's, something that you could justify.
Okay. So you mentioned outdoors. Obviously, that couldn't be done with the Pro2. And in fact, we did a show, WGAN-TV Live at 5 show this time last year titled Matterport plus Leica BLK360, 20 questions and answers. Our audience can find that show by going to the We Get Around Network forum, WGANforum.com, and search for WGAN BLK360 in the search bar, and you'll pop up this show. Awesome show. But I think at that time, what you were talking about was with the Pro2, you couldn't go outside. So you were using the 20,000 plus Leica BLK360 as a way to do outside scan, outdoor elevations as an example. Yeah,
exactly. And then if you're using the BLK360, you don't want Matterport's algorithm to touch that at all. You kind of want to isolate that data, that LiDAR information, if you're going to be doing exterior elevations.
So now that you have the Pro3, does it make the BLK360 irrelevant for you?
No. If we're not concerned about measurements, if we're just concerned about the virtual tour and creating that virtual tour, it absolutely dwarfs the speed of that capture. So it makes the BLK360 irrelevant if you're trying to build a comprehensive virtual tour for sure. But as far as measurements go, you're not going to want to deliver that to the building industry really at all with the Matterport stuff. What you can do, and what we've been doing with the Matterport Pro3, say you're approaching an owner developer that doesn't have that architect, engineer, or construction firm lined up. They're really just trying to shop interest on who's going to take over that conversion. You can order the Matterport plans, or you can do, we draft from the MatterPaks and just do very basic concept plans. If Matterport doesn't do that 25,000 square foot cap, so we can draft, walls, columns, floors, doors, windows, really basic stuff in that MatterPak, and just let them know that's LOD 100, and that's like the conceptual floor plans.
Okay, so for the purpose of our show, let's assume our audience are Matterport service providers. And so if you say LOD, we need to say level of detail, and then please explain what that means and how does that compare?
Basically, when we say LOD, which is level of detail or level of development in the model, that means that geometries are irrelevant entirely. They're conceptual. Basically, you could treat LOD 100 as sketches. And then when you get into LOD 200, that's where the geometries are taken seriously. The level of development, level of detail in the model is going to be ready for the other trades. And so,
is that going to be at the 200 level with the Leica BLK360?
Exactly. So to get to that geometric LOD 200 level, LiDAR and or survey control will have to be applied. But it's a good first step, because if you're doing architectural existing conditions drafting, you want that virtual tour capture anyway. So when you go out for that second site visit and the project's moving along, then you bring the LiDAR out, and that's the only camera you'll need, because you already have that virtual tour. It's good for people just get, even if you need some basic takeoffs, you could shop that virtual tour link around, just let them know that there's no measurements associated with it, but they can do, basic layout.
Well, this is interesting, because I guess my first impressions from talking with a number of Matterport service providers that have purchased the Pro3 for their clients, and their clients may be different than yours. Your clients really are architects, engineers, people in the construction space, the AEC space, builders. You mentioned a fifth category being
there's the owners, and the owners could be developers sometimes.
Okay, so we have both the builder could be an owner, and then separately we could have owners of buildings that are seeking robotic imaging solutions in order perhaps to request quotes from potential vendors.
Right. Mm-hmm. And
so
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just like and just stressing that, like, we're all existing conditions phase, and so what it is during that snapshot in time, just like a lot of the other providers in your network, Dan. So it's just clarifying and communicating with that owner developer who's hiring you, or architect, is that the data that you're giving them is shooting at that certain accuracy spec, then it's being used for that use case that after you've talked to them about what they need it for. Yeah,
so that gosh, I don't know where to begin, Mike. So many questions. Every time you say something, it's so exciting, and I want to just either probe deeper or to help clarify for our audience. So as I was saying, talking to other Matterport service providers, where they're describing the scan data, the level of detail being good enough for their existing clients, and in their view, even potential clients. And I'm thinking, well, Matterport developed its internal capture services on demand team, and I'm thinking, well, they would weigh in on, is the LiDAR scanner of the Pro3 good enough for the vast majority of the kinds of clients they're scanning? So is this one where you would just, we beg to differ to say, no, that people in the AEC space really need a level of detail that exceeds Pro3. We're using high-end scanners for that, but the Pro3 is just good enough for scanning faster, doing outdoors, high ceilings, but that's about capturing that dollhouse view. And
yeah, I would say you definitely don't want to just use that data for any type of drawing, unless you're piecing in, say you forgot to laser scan a closet or like a small bathroom. that data could come in handy where you export that. And it's really asking the client what the goal is of the project and what they need to measure and what they expect to use the drawings for. Because if they say to you they're planning on using it as like the foundation for their entire project, and they're going to be creating all their shop drawings and, you know, how to build the Lego set, essentially, it's got to be like super accurate. And that's what you got to live and die over. But, you know, the Matterport, you know, if we go and scan something and create drawings and we don't have a Matterport of there, people are, you know, pretty upset. You know, they always want that visual data, and they always want it to look like it's put together well. And that's where the Pro3 comes in, where it looks like it is like a comprehensive model, but you don't want to be tracing from it.
So, so Mike, does that mean you're shooting some spaces twice now? Once with Matterport to create a walk around experience for a client, and then another with a high-end point cloud scan for construction drawings?
Exactly. Yeah. So always two systems on site and two data sets. And I guess the third for us would be that drone data, but we'll always scan the same pattern with the Matterport as we do with the laser scanners, and then separate those data sets. And that's how, you know, we are confident in the accuracies when we deliver.
I think that's actually awesome, because I think that now leads us to trying to understand, maybe if we begin with Matterport MatterPak, is if you could actually show us and tell us the difference between a Matterport MatterPak that was shot with a Matterport Pro3 camera versus a Matterport Pro2 camera versus a Leica BLK360 scanner.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll start with and these are going to be different sites, but we'll start with just looking at the Matterport Pro3 point cloud. And this is the E57. Can you see my screen okay, Dan?
Yeah, okay. So we're going to first switch to Matterport
Pro3.
Matterport Pro3 camera, looking at the E57 file. Let me just pause there for a second, Mike, because for Matterport service providers who are buying a Pro3, this may be a big reach to say, hey, I know what scanning is, and all of a sudden you're showing me this data thing. What is that? Where do you get that? So in my Matterport, in your cloud account, there are add-ons that you can buy, and thank you. And so when you go into my Matterport, go to add-ons, then go to E57 file, then go to purchase, and it looks like you've already purchased this particular file for this particular model. So it's actually displaying download as opposed to buy now. But had Mike called up a model, there we go, that you can see there's the purchase price for an E57 file. Now, once you purchase it, then you go get the file, and then we're back to Mike's screen showing us the E57 file. In which program are you viewing the? I'm sorry, we don't see your screen. We see the My Matterport. Yep, thank you.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, so this is Recap, Autodesk Recap. And so if you have AutoCAD or Revit or like the AEC collection through Autodesk, it usually comes with Recap. Recap Pro is great. Recap Standard's good. But this is, you can think of Recap as the point cloud portal and file size manipulation software to get it into Revit and AutoCAD.
So again, before we lose half our audience for the purpose of our Matterport service providers, it's not necessary for you to buy this software. It's not necessary for you to ever look at this file. All we're trying to do today is to help you understand what the difference is between a Matterport MatterPak and E57 file, and the ones that were created either with a Pro3 or Pro2 or BLK360, so that when your client tells you they want a specific kind of file, you'll just have some sense of what it is, what is it, and then perhaps what they are doing with it. And that way you'll also help keep you out of a pickle where you go scan a space with a Matterport Pro3 camera only to find out that the level of detail is not sufficient for the use case that that client has. Am I doing okay on that, Mike?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about understanding your accuracy specifications on the scanner you're using. And then for this one, it was the accurate or the use case we were talking about earlier, Dan. So basically, here's your Matterport photospheres here. And, this is all Matterport Pro3 scan data and photospheres, but you could see, when you're looking at your lines in Revit or Autodesk or AutoCAD or whatever 3D modeling or 2D drafting software you're using, your accuracy on the edge of this building is, it's probably 6 inches to a foot off. So elevations with the Matterport, you're not really going to get good data there. On the interior, we can look at this 3D point cloud. Oh, get a little closer. So if your goal, with the Matterport Pro3 and your BIM modeling is to just count doors, windows, beams, trusses, egress, garages, like if your goal is just to count and that's why you're BIM modeling it, then I could see that being like a worthy application. But if you're trying to understand the true square footage of this building, because it's going to be like, debated for sale, that's where you need to get the LiDAR information. And if it's rough and you communicate clearly with the client that you don't need it super accurate, the Matterport Pro3 could be really good. It's the fastest and really the most cost-effective solution, because a lot of the times, for you to get a LiDAR sensor out, this is 150,000 square foot a series of buildings here combined, to get 1/4 inch accuracy in your drawings, it would just need to be LiDAR scanned to get this entire campus.
When you say LiDAR, Matterport Pro3 camera is a LiDAR scanner, but you're really using the word LiDAR as a shorthand for a $20,000, $40,000, $60,000, $80,000 scanner that has a much higher level of detail, much higher level of accuracy. Yeah,
correct, okay. Dan. Yeah.
So on this particular E57 file that was shot with a Matterport Pro3 camera, is it possible to show a side by side with a Pro2, even if it's a different building or a BLK360?
Yeah. So,
what does it look like if it's better because it's a BLK360 scanner, or what does it look like with a Pro2, which we probably won't even spend too much time on, because I think you'd probably just eliminate the Pro2.
Yeah, let me find a Pro2 point cloud here.
Yeah. So in fact, you found one already. Okay.
Yeah. So this is like, here's the exterior Pro2 point cloud scan. This is when the sunlight was available here, or there was no sunlight here. So we're able to get like this exterior pad. And then let me jump into the inside here. But you can see, your accuracy here is if the purpose is to count, that's good. But the size of the pixels here in the point cloud are fairly big. I haven't got a ton of experience Pro2 versus Pro3 yet, but similar data set. Very, very similar data set. It just, like I was saying earlier, the big benefits of the Pro3 versus the Pro2 would be, the alignment errors you get are pretty much gone. The speed of capture is 2 to 3 times. And then you can scan outside with it, and clients are much happier with it. They think it's a whole new deliverable, it seems.
Are we, what program are we in looking at this?
This is Voxler. It's a point cloud software for hosting point clouds online.
I'm sorry, again, please.
Voxler.
Okay. So I really don't want to spend too much time on the Pro2. In fact, let me just see if I can say this, Mike, and then maybe just correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe at some point the Pro2 was relevant for scan data, but it would have probably been limited to indoor spaces only, absolutely only indoor, and probably smaller spaces. 10,000 square feet or less, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But now that there's a Matterport Pro3 camera where the level of detail is better than the Pro2, and you can scan outside, and you can get high ceilings, and you can do large spaces, and you can do large open spaces, it really make the Matterport Pro3 camera really makes the Matterport Pro2 camera irrelevant. And anyone that was looking for a low-end scan of the data is really going to immediately dismiss the Matterport Pro2 camera versus finding a Matterport service provider that has a Matterport Pro3 camera.
I still think both are pretty valuable.
Okay.
But like, yeah, I think it's still a $6,000 to $8,000 unit. So like the economics to have it.
The Matterport Pro3 camera is 6,000 to 8,000. The 8,000 being comes with the bells and whistles of a kit with some other things bundled in it. But if you were buying a Matterport camera today for the purpose of scan data, I think it's reasonable to say you'd immediately dismiss the Pro2 because it can't collect scan data outside in any practical way.
And commercial, industrial, for sure, or mixed use properties, you'll find yourself with the same amount of scans on a 50,000 square foot as you would a 10,000 square foot mixed use. So like, yeah, it's just like it's a huge pain reliever to not have to battle the Matterport Pro2,
Yeah, so I think really for our conversation today about the MatterPak and the E57 file, it's probably helpful to the community to really understand maybe when would I use a $6,000 or $8,000 Matterport Pro3 camera versus when I would use a Leica BLK360 scanner. And then I'm gonna ask you to please demo and discuss that. But I want to add one more qualification there is when we talk about a BLK360 paired with Matterport, we're really talking about the first generation Leica BLK360 scanner, because as far as I know, Matterport is not supporting the Leica BLK360 second generation. As far as I know.
Yeah.
And I'm going to guess, this is just me guessing, that Matterport will never support the Leica BLK360 second generation because now they probably view it as a competitor to the Matterport Pro3 camera, though I would probably disagree with that.
I still disagree with that too. I'm with you, and I'll show you the difference in the LiDAR setup. So, when you download the E57, like so for this site, it was crazy. We're pretty excited about it. When we downloaded this, it was 60 gigs. So we're like, oh my gosh, there's a ton of data here, and the color data is pretty impressive. But I'll show you the individual scan setups and what we see when we isolate each individual scan location. So each scanner has its own accuracy specifications, by that one setup. So Matterport says it's shooting, I think 20 meters plus or minus 10 millimeters, or 20 feet plus or minus 10 millimeters. It's something like that. And then BLK, has a similar gauge where we'll shoot 20 meters plus or minus 5 to 6 millimeters. And so when we're looking at BLK data, we're definitely able to put it together, especially on a site this big. But when we isolate the individual Matterport setups and we try and bring those together in the software I'm going to show you right now called Register 360, you'll see the kind of discrepancies that we're looking at. So here's the same site. And you take that E57 file, you open it up, and it will come into Register 360 as individual setups. And so you see your photospheres over here. And so those are good and really awesome, nice to see in Register 360.
For clarification, which scanner are we looking at?
This is the Matterport Pro3 still.
Okay.
So the photospheres are very impressive. They're better than most really expensive laser scanners in this situation, if you see here. But when you go and you put, two of these scans together and you isolate them, you look at them. So here's one scan and here's another scan. And you try and put these together. Let's see, where is it?
Oh, you had it. You were real close.
Like this.
Yep. There you go.
Is that right? Oh, here it is. So when you put these together, it's not like the top-down view that you see much discrepancy on, even though we will see some discrepancy here.
And that's called registering.
This is registration, yep. And so, we'll try and snuggle this up. And these look pretty good, but you can see here, the distance between, these two lines is really the tolerance you're working with. So I would say that's about 2-3 inches, just between these two setups that it might be off. And so when you look at the side view here, you try and line this up, you're looking at, this data over here, and you can see that even just those two setups, you're dealing with some troublesome data here. So I think this is probably the gutter. And then, we can try and level this out here. But it's, the top-down floor plan view, you're going to see, decent data. It's when you get into your elevations that you start to see this discrepancy where the point cloud is off here. And so you get it close, you try and render it and put it together. It's probably not going to let you. I haven't been able to connect. And then this is like, a lot of civil data here. It's not on the inside, and we can try and do this for some inside data, but it's going to tell us that it's not able to match because it's not finding enough overlap. So we were excited, you can break these into individual setups here, but it's not going to meet the accuracy specifications. So a plus, another plus with the Pro3 would be just the photospheres and the visual data, but you're not going to get any like geometry. I don't think it's ever going to compete, or right now. It's not going to compete with the Leica BLK1 or 2. That's the 360 unit, not the to go or to fly.
Can you show us the Matterport Plus scanning with the Leica BLK360 first generation?
Yeah, I can show you some. Let me find some BLK data right now. And so we just remember what the Pro3 point cloud looked like. So this is a combination. I think this is going to be BLK data up here. Let's see. Yeah, so here's some BLK360 data. And so you can see, these are two separate BLK360 setups. And you can just see that the lines are much more finite. We're not running any visual on here. This is all laser data. And then when you're jumping to the elevation view, you can see it's much tighter surfaces. The lines are thinner. And so when we look at laser lines and we're thinking about tolerance, the thinner and skinnier that line is the better the data, because the tolerance between the two is the size of that line. So the thinner that line is, the better. We'll bring it together with just those two setups, and we'll know that the absolute mean between those two scans is 3.7 millimeters. So, this room right here is the tolerance, you say, would be 3.7 millimeters, which is like the width of a penny. But yeah, that's the difference, between the raw BLK scan data and the Matterport data that we see.
And help me understand, we're looking at a E57 file that was done with Matterport Plus Leica BLK360 first generation.
No, so this is just BLK360. This is an E57 file, but it's just BLK 360 data.
So that's what I wanted to ask about is do you find that if you use the BLK 360 only for scanning, not for the photography, and you use it only to export the file directly to use in Recap, if that's the program for example,
Mhm.
that the E57 file exported directly from the BLK360 is actually a better E57 file than if you were using the BLK Plus Matterport together and then downloading the E57 from Matterport.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always going to want to keep Matterport data and then with that the BLK360 data separate. You know,
Okay.
if measurements are the main goal.
So I do have more questions. Is there something else that you wanted to show us on this immediate setup?
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
we can keep moving.
Okay, so I think with so if you're a Matterport service provider and you've just been looking at these demos, you are probably scratching your head and say, "Oh, I'm just really feeling overwhelmed." So let's see if we can like take this one step at a time. The first thing is that if you have a potential client and you need to know what it is that they want to do with the scan data. So when would a Matterport Pro3 scan data be an acceptable use case versus examples where it won't? And you've touched on some examples where you just said, no, you can't use a Pro3 to do that.
So in the real estate industry, as a whole, Matterport is by far the best visual platform for sales and leasing. And then where it can, permeate the development process, or say people are looking to buy the property or like that, would be that first level of BIM, that LOD 100 example, where the owner and say that the developer and or one or the other is trying to just figure out what to do with the space. They haven't picked their architect yet. They haven't picked their GC yet. Measurements aren't super important.
GC being general contractor,
construction firms, and they haven't picked those trades yet. And so that's a good use case where you come in or get the project started with the visual information. Maybe they have some potential buyers, maybe some are tire kickers. They just send them the virtual tour link, and you have a more comprehensive view of the property.
But is there any use case of the scan data from the Matterport Pro3 camera in that first round?
Right, and then so producing, if it's under 25,000 square feet, producing 2D floor plans that are very basic, and then in big writing, on there your disclaimer probably is that this is not a survey, all measurements, similar to the Matterport disclaimer, but you want to blow it up even more and let them know, and then make sure that your terms are appropriate as well. So 2D conceptual floor plans, what we call them, LOD 100 floor plans, where geometries are semi-irrelevant.
So today in the We Get Around Network forum, a member posts to say, hey, I mostly do residential real estate. I recently got a Matterport Pro3 camera. I'm thinking that I might be able to go after small developers, builders. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to that member regarding that Matterport Pro3 and that specific category?
Yeah, I think the Matterport Pro, you brought up a great point. I didn't think of this, but it's we're 2 weeks through the camera, so we're still learning the applications that might make sense with the economics that this thing produces. And so construction punch listing and progress reporting would be great, especially like say the house is just getting framed up. There's a lot of sunlight coming through. It might be really hard to do a Pro2 in that environment. So you can do that. Everything from the raw land, to the stub up process, where they're putting all their MEP up under the slab.
Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
Yep, MEP. And so there's the construction in progress, similar to how people use drones, and they do photo, video, and then a map on a weekly basis. The Pro3, I think, is going to be opening up that realm a lot more, where you can do, large construction. So this site that I just showed you, 150,000 square foot campus, 150,000 square foot interior campus, was done one day with the Pro3. And so like giving people like a Pro3 day rate might be interesting, that we're exploring, where you can go out and people can treat you more like a subcontractor on a traditional construction project, where they know your day rate. They know generally how much you're going to produce, with that camera. And then you're going through and you're just checking, and you're just scanning the site so people remotely can walk through it and show the rest of the team where the project is.
So what I'm hearing, like for a small builder, maybe residential construction, maybe small commercial construction, the Matterport Pro3 camera opens up first outdoors. That means you could do the raw land. You pointed out, even while they're framing, the sunlight may be pouring in. So now that opens up the opportunity for Pro3. We didn't really talk in this case about large, because it may not be a large space. We haven't really talked about the ceiling heights, but the Pro3 is going to get higher up. I know in our last show, you talked about the importance of being able to get the ceiling. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I guess
Light fixtures.
Yeah, I mean, so just like getting through like a big site fast in an active construction environment is what the Pro3 allows you to do. You know, general contractors, people on work, you know, putting the nails in the walls, they're not going to be happy if you're not scanning, if you're scanning the same spot over and over again, trying to get through the active construction site. But as far as the ceilings go, with the Matterport, really, you're going to need more expensive LiDAR scanners to get ceiling data, you know, from what we've experienced for sure.
Okay, so I will save that topic because we moved back to another category. But if I stay on the small stuff, the builder, small builder, residential builders, small commercial construction, if you're doing a renovation and you want to capture it as an as-built, is the Pro3 sufficient on a smaller space under 10,000?
You know, we're still testing it. You know, and it would be like more of the closet and like small bathroom maybe examples that were missed, like where you can just really isolate that one 20-foot radius area maybe at the most. But yeah, we'll get back to you on that, Dan. We're still testing it.
So I think what I'm hearing, you're reluctant to use a Matterport Pro3 camera for the purpose of doing an as-built that might be used for construction drawings to create perhaps a BIM model, or to create drawings that might be used in construction, because of the level of detail, the level of accuracy is just too far off in the use cases that
yeah, you're not going to get quarter inch, you're not going to get half inch accuracy, and when you say as built in construction, it's usually like an eighth of an inch.
Okay.
And so it's just like it's not there yet, but definitely important.
But I did hear, I think that correct me if I'm wrong here, but so far with the Pro3, you've experienced fewer alignment errors, or just
way less. Yeah, it's really like it's changing the economics on what we can offer a virtual tour for, just because it covers, you know, way more ground.
And you can scan faster.
Yes, yeah, I think it's definitely faster. You know, it's a different buzzer, but it's I think we're getting like 5 to 8 seconds faster than the Pro2.
What does the buzzer mean?
Or just how it spins, you know, like the Matterport like spins a little differently. It's one consistent buzzer spin, weed whacker, you know, sound. But like so when we time it, it's been like 5 to 8 seconds faster than the Pro2. So
okay, so the Matterport Pro3 camera sounds like it for marketing purposes, for flushing out the initial impressions of a property, for quickly scanning a space, because I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're using these 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, $80,000 scanners, the time it takes the buzz to rotate around is way more than a Matterport Pro3 camera. Therefore, you're going to be on site way longer. Therefore, you have to charge much more. So really, with the Matterport Pro3 camera, you could get in there, and the owner or the builder, the property manager, whoever is marketing the property, obviously gets the beauty of the Matterport digital twin, the walk around experience, but also gets enough, can get that faster and get the scan data for the purpose of at least maybe roughing out 2D floor plans with the appropriate disclaimers.
Yeah, and it's all about what they can afford too, at that point in the project life cycle. So if you can make that a first step, get your foot in the door with just the visual information affordable, it's worth it to upsell the more expensive measurements later.
Okay, so then what happens? Clients, so your Matterport service provider, you figured out how to get that first phase to help market the property, to maybe get some initial floor plans done. And the client says, great, I now need to get to a BIM model, and rather than sending in an army of students with cameras and tape measures or laser measures, I really want to have a model to begin with. Could you do that? Do you have a data file? And then somehow you're going to have this thought about, well, I got this MatterPak thing. Is that okay? I got this E57 file thing. Is that okay? I got these things that I can convert these files so that you can open it up in SketchUp or Revit, which a lot of people in the construction space are using. And I think at that point, you're going to say, oh, be careful.
Yeah.
Give me the like, uh-oh.
What camera did you use? And then the uh-oh comes into play if their goal is something other than that. Because, there's a variety of stuff that builders or even like guys that are leasing the property will ask you, like, if we put new steel in here, like, could you create a prefabrication model so they can order $50,000 worth of materials, and then that's on you if it's not right.
So that's where that level of detail is so important. So
right.
I think the point of this conversation to say, hey, you're a Matterport service provider. You got this Matterport Pro3 camera or the acceleration kit, the $8,000 version instead of the $6,000 version. But be careful, because what is that? That's like there's a lot of things that you can do with it, but be careful if their use case requires a level of detail, and this may be one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. Mike, does Robotic Imaging provide consulting services to Matterport service providers that are like right there in that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll team up on a project, and you could sub us out for any of that work to help either generate the 3D models too. We like to say, like, we come in a third or half the price of Matterport on the BIM modeling side that they offer on their website. And so it's just
pause there for a moment, and then I'll ask you to explain that. So again, for Matterport service providers, if you go into My Matterport, you go into the cloud account, you go into add-ons, and there'll be a little add-on box that says BIM file. Okay, Mike, can you explain what that Matterport BIM file service is, and then contrast that perhaps with Robotic Imaging version of that?
So that's your BIM model probably in LOD 300 terms, which would be your walls, windows, floors, doors, ceilings, and some of the components that you'd see in BIM model. And there's a list of items that classify LOD 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 BIM models. And so it's all about the sensor that you're collecting the data with. And so if you're going to create a real BIM model, which is a building information model that construction firms jump in and use to coordinate their materials and their construction process, you just got to be careful with it. And you got to make sure that you're shooting, with the right sensor, to actually classify it as so.
Okay, but presumably, even if I have a Matterport Pro3 camera, I can still order a BIM file from Matterport. What is it that I'm buying? And then why would I actually want to talk to Robotic Imaging instead?
So if you want a BIM file that you can simply count the inventory of components in that property, so you want to know how many windows there are, you want to know how many doors there are, and you want to plan to renovate it or refresh that space with new materials. That's good. Matterport's great for that. Just counting what is there. You would want to go through Robotic Imaging if accuracy is important, and if you want to convert and take that Matterport data, get another laser file to complement it, and create more accurate drawings or models.
So, but I presume robotic imaging offers the same BIM file service as Matterport, but I imagine that you charge less than what Matterport charges.
We right now, yes. But we'll see. We'll see. When we do any BIM files or drawings, we use laser files. And that would be
So
like
okay, so again, laser, you're referring to much higher end LiDAR scanners than the Matterport Pro3 LiDAR scanner.
correct.
And therefore, we may be comparing apples to oranges here. So again, it comes back to the level of detail. What is the use case? And I think just to maybe put a period in paragraph just in this little topic is to say, if this sounds like it's overwhelming you, call Mike, get in touch with Mike, www.roboticimaging.com. This may be an opportunity to engage in robotic imaging, either for consulting services or to pair up with you in order so that you don't lose that job, because you got a trusted relationship. Client wants to do construction drawings, wants an as-built, wants to prepare their BIM model, requires a higher level of scanner expertise, etc. That's where you have an opportunity to pair up with robotic imaging to be essentially either a sub to you or some other arrangement that you work out with robotic imaging.
Yeah, feel free to call the office line or send us an email, and we're happy to answer any questions and talk through any projects you have, with you, and find out what the level of accuracy is.
So, we've been talking about the difference between a Matterport Pro3 camera versus these high-end scanners, LiDAR scanners. You mentioned at the top of the show that you love the Matterport Pro3 camera, and that you actually, robotic imaging plans to buy more. Why do you plan to buy more if they don't do what it is that is your bread and butter day in, day out?
Yeah, so when it comes to our bread and butter day in, day out, it's always your visual information data set that we separate, and it's our geometric files, which is derived from the higher end laser scanners. And so we plan to, if we're going on site to do any project, we're always two technicians. One runs Matterport, one runs the geometric laser scanner files. And so we can get through properties faster with the laser scanners, because we're storing all that data locally and then putting it together after the fact. So typically the Matterport would take twice as long. Now it's, the Pro3 and the laser scanner, you finish at the same exact time. So just the efficiency on site.
So just for clarification, when you're using a high-end scanner, you really are first of all, it's not paired up with Matterport. You're just collecting, I want to say, the point cloud.
Yep.
And you're just collecting the point cloud to download when you get back to the office.
Correct.
So you have no overhead of the imaging, of capturing imaging. So for example, if you were using a Leica BLK360 paired with Matterport, you're capturing scan data plus imagery. Now you've kind of separated the two and said, okay, well, for point clouds, we're going to use the level of detail scanner that's required by the client, by what their needs are, and we're going to use Matterport Pro3 camera to capture the visual. Did you have a term? Did you have a term for that?
Just visual data sets. Yep.
A visual data set. So for your purpose now with the Matterport Pro3 camera, it lets you do fast, fewer, if none, misalignment errors, outdoors, large spaces, large open space. Just to reminisce here a little bit, 5 years ago, you bought a Matterport Pro2 camera, a Matterport Pro1 camera.
Pro2, I got Pro2, yeah.
A Matterport Pro2 camera. And I want to say your first job was 100,000 square feet.
It was, yeah, we were talking about that. And
that didn't go particularly well with the Matterport Pro2, which is probably a good thing. You say sometimes, because your business totally evolved because of all the limitations of the Pro2, to say,
right.
there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And fast forward to today, and 10 people, employees of the company, all these high-end scanners. Your knowledge went from being a Matterport service provider with a Pro2 to boom, you're having these conversations that I can barely keep up with here about the data files and the data sets and the XYZ file and all that. So how exciting is that? And so that Pro3 camera now lets you do the visual capture. Do you even have an estimate? I know you said your team have only been using it for about 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any sense on a large space? Is it half the time? Is it?
Oh yeah, I think half the time, especially when you get into the bigger stuff. You can really see the comparison.
Give me an example.
So let me pull up the same file here. 1 second.
I always think I'm at a molecular biology class or something when you're something, or playing a game of Go that went awry.
Yeah, right. So so here's that Pro3 file. Like, we were looking at the point cloud of it, but here's the hosted link. So let's give an example here.
Well, that could not have been done with the Pro2,
right,
except with the art, which is really a crazy thing to explain.
It is, you're painting. So let's see. So this space right here, to get from where I just was all the way down to the end of this facility here, probably took 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes, which would be an absolute nightmare to do with the Pro2.
Yeah,
I'm going in a straight line here. I'm getting a good dollhouse. I mean, when I'm out in this open space here, it's hitting, the wall on each side. But to get through this what would be a troublesome space for the Pro2, it just makes, it's like the perfect camera for like a space like this.
I'm going to even stop you right there, because I think that the big picture, had that even been a warehouse and it was an empty warehouse and it was just maybe some pillars, with a Pro2, you probably couldn't have done it. You would have had misalignment errors. It would have taken a lot longer. Even if you tried to figure out some way of dealing with the open space of targets of some sort, it would be difficult.
Be 3 days probably, yeah.
Not capture anything related to the ceiling in the warehouse. So it sounds like for robotic imaging, the Matterport Pro3 camera is like, wow, this is awesome.
Oh yeah, we're excited about it. We're looking to buy more, and I think we'll still do small residential houses where the Pro2 makes a lot of sense. And but anything exterior related, I mean, even on a residential house, you start showing them that outdoor data, they're going to be happy about it, and they can understand the space more. And then that's the thing with Matterport, is that you just understand the space. You can get architects and you can get people to start thinking about like what's possible with the space, because even if you're scanning the outside of it, they might be able to see a design, on that LOD 100 conceptual level, where it's just getting the ideas and shoppers going.
Have you had AEC architect kind of clients where you were just previously providing an XYZ point cloud, and then they said, well, hey, how about this Matterport thing? Do you have some way of, can we do that too? I mean, did the business kind of evolve that all of a sudden there were people who you were just doing the visual and then they wanted the data, and then there were people who just wanted the data, but now you could say, oh, would you like fries with that? Would you like the visual with that? So you now essentially get paid to scan the same space twice,
right? And
for two different purposes.
Right, yeah, and sometimes they'll be like, I don't want they're budget conscious, and they say, forget the Matterport, maybe come down $1,000 or something of that scan to BIM model and so sometimes people like this example I'm showing you, this was just a virtual tour for that LOZ 100 conceptual level. They don't know there's the anchor tenant here is moving out, and they need to start shopping around, what could potentially be done with the space, where they don't want to spend a ton of money on a full-blown BIM model or anything like that, and they just want that perfect club for that shot.
So would you almost describe that as the one who's selling the space really has the use for the Matterport Pro3 camera, and the one who's buying the space really has the use of the LiDAR, the need for the higher end LiDAR data?
That's a great point. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's and we'll keep figuring it out and asking the questions and seeing, but definitely on the sales side, there's people that will buy. We've done just Matterports for that will buy the property sight unseen, because of the virtual walkthrough and everything, and they're like, "Yep, it's perfect," And so,
Awesome.
yeah, that's it, Dan.
Mike, we've covered a lot of ground on the Matterport MatterPak E57 file, Pro3 versus Pro2 versus BLK360. Is there anything additional on this topic?
Nothing. That we're just stoked to be in the industry and stoked to be part of We Get Around. We're excited to keep locking arms with you, this year. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us or Dan. We're an email away. So
that's Robotic Imaging, www.roboticimaging.com. Mike, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks so much, Dan. Thanks, everyone.
We've been visiting today with Robotic Imaging co-founder and CEO, Mike Chawaga, and for Mike in the greater Philadelphia area, Dan in the Atlanta area, and you've been watching WGAN-TV live at 5.